This bill has one purpose. It will save lives.
They're not going to go through it anyway, whether this law's there or not. Not going to go through the background check. They're not going to get the card that says they're allowed to purchase a firearm.
Delaware Governor John Carney has signed off on 6 bills concerning gun safety.
Some days I come down Broad Street, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm like, where am I?
And manufacturers and dealers can be held liable for negligent actions that lead to gun violence. The measures ban the sale of assault weapons and raises the age limit to buy a gun to 21.
Attorney General says ban assault weapons in court, defending arm control measures. In recent legal maneuvers, the New Jersey office of the Attorney General has taken a proactive stance against challenges to arm control measures, emphasizing public safety and the constitutionality of arm regulations. This advocacy is showcased through 2 significant friend-of-the-court filings involving high-profile cases addressing attack weapons, large-capacity mags or LCMs, and arm access for individuals under domestic crime restraining orders. New Jersey co-led an amicus brief alongside 17 other states in support of Delaware's attack weapons and LCMs restrictions. This filing was made in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit for the case Delaware State Sportsmen's Association versus Delaware Department of Safety and Homeland Security. The lawsuit originally challenged Delaware's laws on the grounds of Second Amendment rights, claiming these restrictions were unconstitutional. The U.S. District Court for the District of Delaware had previously upheld these laws, ruling that Delaware's regulations are constitutional. The state attorneys general argue that attack arms and LCMs pose significant public safety risks designed specifically for mass slings and capable of inflicting catastrophic injuries due to their ability to fire high-velocity bullets rapidly and over long ranges. They contend that these arms and accessories are not commonly used for self-defense and historically fall outside the protection of the Second Amendment. The amicus brief, co-led by New Jersey Attorney General Matthew J. Plankton and Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell, stresses that states have the authority and responsibility to regulate dangerous weapons and accessories that threaten community safety. It underscores the historical precedent of imposing restrictions on new and particularly dangerous forms of weaponry, aligning Delaware's laws with broader public safety interests shared by multiple states. In another significant legal battle, New Jersey and 25 other states filed an amicus brief urging the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn a lower court ruling in United States v. Rahimi. This case arose from a Fifth Circuit decision that struck down a federal law barring individuals subject to domestic crime restraining orders from accessing arms. The defendant, under a restraining order for attacking his girlfriend, challenged the law on Second Amendment grounds, arguing it infringed upon his right to bear arms. The Fifth Circuit's ruling posed substantial concerns for the public safety advocates as it undermined federal and state efforts to protect victims of domestic violence. The amicus brief argues that allowing individuals under domestic crime restraining orders access to arms increases the risk of harm or demise to victims and law enforcement personnel. It highlights that nearly every state has enacted laws restricting arm access for individuals subject to such restraining orders, reflecting a broad consensus on the critical need for these protections. The attorneys general contend that the appeals court decision not only endangers domestic crime victims, but also impedes states and the federal government in fulfilling their duty to safeguard public safety. They emphasize the well-established legal framework supporting restrictions on armed possession for individuals deemed a risk to themselves or others, particularly in the context of domestic crime. Both cases underscore broader debates surrounding arm control in the United States, highlighting tensions between Second Amendment rights and public safety imperatives. The filings by New Jersey's Attorney General's office reflect a commitment to upholding state regulations aimed at curbing armed crime and protecting vulnerable populations. In recent years, arm-related demises and injuries have reached alarming levels across the country, prompting heightened scrutiny and legislative action at both state and federal levels. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report that arm-related injuries were among the leading causes of demise for younger age groups in 2020, underscoring the urgent need for effective regulation. The legal strategies employed by New Jersey and other states in these cases exemplify collaborative efforts to defend and reinforce armed regulations deemed crucial for public safety. They seek to navigate the complex terrain of Second Amendment jurisprudence while advocating for policies designed to mitigate the devastating impact of armed crime in communities. Supreme Court ruling. On Friday, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a federal rule classifying semi-auto rifles equipped with bump stock attachments as mesh arms. This rule was enacted following the 2017 mass slaying in Las Vegas, where an armed man using bump stocks slayed 58 people and injured hundreds. The court's decision, authored by Justice Clarence Thomas, significantly restricts the executive branch's ability to regulate arms and address armed crime. A bump stock is an accessory that allows a semi-auto rifle to fire at a rate similar to a mesh arm by harnessing the recoil energy to bump the trigger back into the shooter's finger, thus resetting and firing the arm more rapidly. In 2018, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or ATF, redefined bump stock-equipped rifles as mesh arms under the National Firearms Act, effectively banning their sale and possession. Justice Clarence Thomas, a staunch advocate of Second Amendment rights, wrote the majority in a 6-3 decision in the case of Garland versus Cargill. Thomas argued that the ATF had overstepped its statutory authority by reclassifying bump stocks as mesh arms. He emphasized that the technical operation of bump stocks doesn't align with the legal definition of a mesh arm. According to Thomas, nothing changes when a semi-auto rifle is equipped with a bump stock. Between every shot, the shooter must release pressure from the trigger and allow it to reset before re-engaging the trigger for another shot. Justice Sonia Sotomayor led the dissenting opinion, joined by the court's liberal justices. Sotomayor contended that bump stocks essentially convert semi-auto rifles into fully auto weapons, which are regulated as mesh arms under federal law. She used a metaphor to illustrate her point. When I see a bird that walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck. Sotomayor argued that a bump stock equipped rifle firing multiple rounds with a single trigger function fits the description of a mesh arm, thus supporting the ATF's regulation. The ruling has substantial implications for arm control and public safety regulations in the United States. Critics argue that the decision undermines efforts to mitigate armed crime and mass slayings. President Joe Biden criticized the decision, calling it a setback for armed safety. He urged Congress to pass legislation banning bump stocks and attack arms, although such efforts face significant political obstacles. With Republicans controlling the House and Democrats holding a slim majority in the Senate, passing comprehensive arm control measures remains challenging. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer also condemned the ruling, stating, "Bump stocks have played a devastating role in many of the horrific mass slayings in our country, but sadly, it's no surprise that the Supreme Court rolled back this necessary public safety rule as they push their out-of-touch extreme agenda." Schumer's statement reflects a broader concern among arm control advocates that the court's decision will lead to increased availability of bump stocks, potentially enabling more mass slayings.
You help ensure that your son and all the victims of gun violence are not forgotten. They didn't die in vain. Designed to reduce gun violence and save lives, and I'm so proud of the tremendous progress we made since then. The year before I came to the presidency, the murder rate was the highest increase on record. Don't underestimate what you've done. It's amazing what you've done. You've changed people's minds.
Bump stock ban reversed. In response to the Las Vegas shooting, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, issued a rule in 2018 declaring bump stocks illegal. The regulation required anyone owning or possessing bump stocks to either destroy them or surrender them to the agency to avoid criminal penalties. This move was aimed at preventing further mass slayings facilitated by such weapons. Michael Cargill, an arms shop owner in Austin, Texas, surrendered 2 bump stocks to the ATF and subsequently challenged the rule in federal court. His case was initially dismissed by a U.S. District Court, but the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ruled in his favor. The appeals court found that the 1986 law's definition of a mesh arm didn't apply to bump stocks. According to the law, a mesh arm is defined as any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can be readily restored to shoot automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger. The Fifth Circuit concluded that rifles equipped with bump stocks don't meet this definition because they don't shoot multiple bullets automatically by a single function of the trigger. Instead, the shooter must repeatedly pull the trigger, albeit at a much faster rate due to the bump stock mechanism. The Biden administration appealed the Fifth Circuit's decision to the Supreme Court, defending the Trump-era rule. During oral arguments, the administration maintained that bump stocks enabled semi-auto rifles to fire automatically with a single pull of the trigger, fitting the definition of a mesh arm under the 1986 law. Attorneys for Cargill countered that bump stocks require the trigger to be pulled repeatedly, not automatically firing multiple rounds with a single pull. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court struck down the regulation. Justice Clarence Thomas, writing for the majority, argued that the ATF had overstepped its statutory authority. He emphasized that a semi-auto rifle equipped with a bump stock still requires the shooter to reset and re-engage the trigger between shots, thus not fitting the legal definition of a mesh arm. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, in her dissent, argued that the decision undermines federal efforts to prevent mass slings by limiting the government's ability to regulate devices like bump stocks. She highlighted that bump stocks effectively convert semi-auto rifles into auto arms similar to those used by the Las Vegas shooter. This ruling follows another significant arm-related decision by Justice Thomas in 2022, which invalidated a New York law restricting arm carrying in public without demonstrating a special need. This decision expanded Second Amendment rights and influenced ongoing cases, including one testing a federal law preventing individuals subject to domestic crime protective orders from possessing arms. A decision on this case is expected soon. And that's going to do it for this video, you guys. See you next time, and bye for now.